Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anto Budiarjo. This is Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon, try and figure out the future for smart buildings. Great to have you with us. In case you're wondering who we are, panelists are listed on mondaylive.org. Most important point to make here is views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Keep that in mind. And let's make this session interactive with comments and questions on chat. Looking forward to that. And this slide deck is available also on mondaylive.org. So this being the first Monday of October 24, we are kicking off a month talking about system of systems that we've sort of touched on a couple of times the last couple of weeks, but we want to begin as much as we can in system of systems over this month. And so the agenda for today is our normal news and trends and talk about system of systems, really talking about what is it and why does it matter? And hopefully some interesting discussions. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken. What's the news from Automated Buildings?
Thanks a lot, Anto. Lots of news. Actually, I've still got the old holder for the AHR programs up there, but ironically enough, just hours before the meeting, they've actually published our first take. We don't have our speakers. We'll be sending out the requests and trying to confirm up our speakers, but we do have the program on the AHR site, and we'll be also following up with something that I'll be able to post next week. But that's what's happening there. Yeah, we're excited about the October theme, System of Systems. What we've done on our slide here today is we provided a summary of our buildings as assets, which was our theme for September. And it's kind of interesting if you take a look at all of these various weeks, we kind of evolved to the conclusion that the systems of systems things is an important part of the building as an asset. And I think that's very true. So I'm really looking forward to what the discussion is going to be. Actually, all of the, so what we've done is we provided a summary of each of the weeks of September. And if you click on them, they don't take you to the Automated Buildings article, they take you to the LinkedIn posts. And it's kind of interesting to see who's interacting with it, what they're saying, and how active they've been. And certainly I can feed back to the group that, frankly, Monday Live has been a tough sell for us to try and get people to take a look at it. But since we've started talking about buildings as assets and system of systems, the traffic has significantly increased, and people are interested in what we're saying. So be careful what you say. People are actually listening to you now. The other one, so basically we've got down the left-hand side there the various weeks, and we've provided a summary as we did last Monday's. We provided a summary. We're using Gemini, I guess it is, Gemini, Google's AI assist to kind of read through the Monday Zooms and pull out the points. And it does, I think, a really good job of that. It tends to get the salient points and does provide sort of a Cliff Notes or a Coles Notes in Canada, we call them, a summary of what happened. And folks don't have a lot of time to sit down and spend an hour going through these. This gives them the summary, and then they may see a few items that may cause them to try and pull through. And the fact that Anto has put the captions on the Zooms is good, I think, because you can kind of spin through and you can quickly see what people are talking about. And you can kind of stop when you see a topic that kind of interests you. So I think it's working out well. The other one that we did is we unleashed down at the bottom there, it says Open Source Revolution. And on that particular article, we opened it up and on a 57-page document. And again, this is the thing that AI is really useful for, is we tend to see a 57-page document and groan and think we should read it, but we don't have time to read it. So I think sicking AI on it and having it kind of pull out the salient points is a worthwhile exercise. It's not that anybody here couldn't do that themselves, but you didn't, and we did. So it just makes it a little bit easier. We're also starting to see some of our sponsors are starting to talk about what we're talking about, which I think we have to credit the group for some of the thought we've had. This one over, yeah, that one right there is the impact on the BMS industry. That this is going to be a solution to deal with some of the overcoming the complexities and the talent shortages. And when you see our AHR programming, you'll see that we have at least 2 or 3 sessions that are heading in that direction. So that's an important piece. And I think the genesis of that came from Monday Live and C4SB and some of the thinking that's been going on with this crowd. The other thing we have is one of our rebranded sponsors, Neves. They're starting to use the words, if you read the last line there, they're saying, empowering your operating technology, OT, journey to the cloud and AI. So people are seeing the system of systems as something they have to be part of, and they have to sell the concept as well. So I think it's going to be a very important month as we all position ourselves to better understand what systems of systems are. Back to you, Anto. Oh,
Thank you,
just
Ken.
before I went, I do have one more quick, is we're a media sponsor for the smart buildings in London, in Rogers country, and that starts on Wednesday, so it's almost showtime. Several of our sponsors are also going to be in London, so we see it's a very good one for us to be a media sponsor of. We're getting a lot of interest from Europe, as they haven't discovered us yet, and this has been the connection. So it's been a good connection for us, and I think it's been a good connection for them. And I think we all, as I mentioned last week, is, you know, we have to think globally in everything we do and act locally, but think globally. So on that, I'll give it back to you, Anto.
I'm going to ask Roger, the Smart Building Show. I know that that's actually been going for quite some time, but we've talked about it in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Can you just sort of speak to what that's all about, how big of a conference, how focused it is, etc.?
Yeah, it's very very focused. I mean, it's very much built around the BAS industry, so all the BAS players are there. But there's more and more people who provide services have actually started showing there, and they get a lot of people through the door, and it's not huge, but it's very focused, and a lot of attention goes on in the industry here on it, because I think I've said before, there's something like heading towards 500 system integrators in the UK, because the manufacturers no longer really are big players in the controls industry here. About 75, nearly heading towards 80% of business, controls business is done by system integrators now, and people like Siemens have gone out of doing the turnkey projects and stuff. So it's a very different market, but you're getting a lot of players who are offering cloud services now that are actually showing there. Less and less people with lots of little controllers and bits and pieces on their boards, and more about the services they're able to provide. It's, as you say, it's been going for a few years. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to be there this year. I'm going to go up to Copenhagen day after tomorrow for some business stuff. But it is a good focused show, and you know, like it does get attended by consultants as well as a whole range of other people there, because it is the one show that goes on in the UK, quite honestly.
They're
Is there much?
actually suggesting that they're looking for like a number of about 2,000 folks. Does that sound sort of reasonable? Is it
Yeah,
that?
that's the sort of number they get, yeah.
Yeah, okay, when you said small, I was thinking like, 500 or something
Oh,
like that.
no. They got about they got about 100 presentations and about 100 exhibitors and things like that. So it's you know, it's not tiny,
Good
tiny,
size.
but in terms of some of the stuff you get in Middle Europe and you get at ASHRAE and stuff, it's not that sort of size, but it's a lot more focused. So you don't have any equipment manufacturers at all on it at all. It's just all technology based.
That's actually a huge
Well-
number for a focused event.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so focused that as you kept saying in your description of it. So, I mean, Anto and I always used to joke around in North America that we're hard pressed to find more than 600 people in North America that knew what we were talking about. So if you can find 2,000 in the UK,
Yeah,
that's.
no, it's good.
But I see what's happened is it looks like it's kind of leaked out of being a UK phenomena and to a global, because of the amount of support from all over of it I was extremely impressed with.
Yeah, well, the people who shine there are international anyway, you know, all the bigger companies are there, but it certainly has started bringing in people from overseas, and certainly nearer Europe.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Roger.
Good.
Okay, so I put up on my slide, this is something that happens every 3 months, every quarter. This company, IoT Analytics, does this sort of analysis of what public company CEOs talk about in their quarterly calls. And the last one I showed 3 months ago had AI all over sort of the top part of this. And there's hardly AI, there's not much AI here, or much less than previous. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But obviously looking at broader into sort of political side of things and elections and stuff, that's kind of interesting. But one of the other things that it talked about is, and I thought this was interesting, is the first time I saw building automation specifically mentioned by them. As being the sort of the AI related applications that these CEOs are mentioning. Digital twin, conversational AI is obviously not, it's more the sort of LLM stuff and predictive maintenance and building automation. Those are kind of in our area. So I thought that was interesting. That's all I had. The normal link board. If you want any of these links. Anything else anybody want to bring up?
I did just one thing I saw as an article, which I thought was quite interesting, was it's beginning to actually, people or companies are beginning to look and saying, you know, people are moving on from SaaS to VAS, where it's a value added thing. So instead of paying a subscription continual fee, you actually pay for what you use. So it's actually based on number of transactions, conversations, or customer interactions, and you only pay for what you use, if you see what I'm saying. So it's scalable, and it means smaller companies can use it a little bit, or bigger companies can use more, and you literally pay for what you do. So it's quite an interesting move. And the same Salesforce have already started using it with one of their Agentforce platforms, and charges $2 per conversation instead of paying, you know, per seat. So an interesting move on. That's because of the use of, they're claiming, because of the use of AI, you know, driven deliveries.
I'll go ahead and add something, just a reminder to everybody. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And just a time to always sit back and see what we all are doing with respect to OT, cybersecurity and things. And a couple of things that I found, and just kind of as a reminder to me that phishing is has plagued roughly 87% of US companies in the last 12 months. These are some stats from a couple places, Security Magazine being one, et cetera. And that the over half of the US companies have started to implement MFA as requirements, which I think is good. And that the average cost of a data breach is now around $4.8 million, which represents 10% more than it did last time at this same time. So again, it's something we all have to be aware of, deal with, and things like that. So with that, so October Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
Good.
Steve, do you?
No,
have-
I'm good. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so system of systems. What is it and why does it matter? Are kind of the two questions that we want to talk about today. And I thought I'd start by highlighting this paper that I actually mentioned a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks back, the System of Systems paper from Digital Twin and the IoT Industry IoT Consortium, as you saw there. And I actually see one of the authors, Doug Migliori, on the call here, an attendee. So maybe we can pull him in later on, with him about it. To me, one of the things about this, this whole system of systems that was puzzling, is really what is a system of systems and how is it different from a system? Because I think we all understand what a system is. Building management system is a system. Fire system is a system, et cetera, et cetera. So what's the difference? And this table, which I've got up in a bigger form here, is really, I think, the really valuable table. I'm going to sort of leave this up as being the way to compare the two, comparing systems and system of systems. And we talked about this 2 or 3 weeks back. And I think I was using the comparison between an aeroplane and an airline system as being the sort of the 2 ways of comparing this. An airliner and an aircraft is definitely a system because it's predefined. All of the interactions of all the pieces, the engine and the flaps and everything else is all integrated. It is deterministic. You need to know when you go to Boeing to buy a system exactly what it's going to do. It's going to fly. It's not going to do anything else, right? It's very, very specific. The construction was done by a single stakeholder, Boeing or Airbus, and it's then maintained in a very controlled manner, as you would expect an airplane to be, and the capabilities are predetermined. You know what it's going to do. It's going to carry people or cargo or whatever. Right? So that's really a system, and I think if you take BMS and fire systems and any other systems that we typically talk about, they all have the same attribute. They're predefined, integrated, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, they are thing itself. Whereas a system of systems has completely different sort of formulation in terms of how what it is, because it is not predefined. You cannot tell what the scope of the composition of an airline system is, because you can add or drop cities, or you can add a drop flight and anytime you want. So it's kind of organic, depending on needs. The connections are different. The completeness, you can never define whether an airline system is complete, because you can always add another one. And so that's kind of a system of systems that kind of grows. It's very dynamic in its nature. And the construction is also different because there are different players involved. There are different types of people involved in something like an airline system, and it's managed in a completely different way. And the capability is then sort of this word emergent. You get sort of emergent capabilities out of systems working with each other in a system of systems perspective. So I'd love to leave this up for a bit and maybe just have an open conversation with the group here. Whether this makes sense, whether this helps, or whether this is just as confusing as before. Because this is trying to get to the question, what is it in a way, what's different to between SOSs and more traditional systems.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at it earlier, Anto, and just thinking about how it could apply to our own industry. And I think, what are the benefits of doing it? Because one of Mark's comments always is, what's the outcome? And one of the challenges for our industry is if you like, the construction and the aftermarket phase of completely separated. And if you actually thought about the benefits of the systems that are used during the construction phase being part of a system of systems thing with those that are used in the aftermarket or as part of the operation of the building, the fact that you could have, it came up last week of great, so the BAS knows about all the stuff, but actually a lot of the construction phase will be able to tell you where it is and what the connections are and who provided it and things like this. And that would be the added value, and a kind of, whilst it's different, it was one of those things that struck me, that is that something that could bring that gap we've always had between construction and aftermarket together.
That seems to be a good way of looking at it, because in a way you can treat the construction of a building this way, right? In systems way, right? Because it is predefined. It's going to be that building with so many floors and so many systems.
Yeah. So Anto, I'll weigh in. So I think I agree with Roger saying what you just said is that the system column is really the construction phase. Let's go build a system that does this. Okay. And it gets defined in the specifications, and it's something that you can put a price because it's deterministic. You know exactly how many components are going to be required, at least as far as the specification is concerned, and it can all be priced out, and now you got your system, right? You go to the next column, system of systems. What are we really talking about there? We're talking about operations. And as I mentioned, I don't think it was on a Monday Live. I think it was in our Wednesday call. The owner/operator. The operation side of things is about my building or my buildings, right? And how that owner operator thinks about their buildings. And when you get to that level, it's about, well, how well is the building running? Well, what does that mean? How well is the building running? Because then it forces the conversation, well, what does the building consist of? Consists of multiple systems that in aggregate define the building. And by definition, it's organic. Meaning it was defined maybe at the very beginning, but it changes with time. You might not, building can go in and maybe have, say on the security side, some sort of intrusion detection system, but then later they just decide they're going to put some sort of access control on the elevators, right? So they've added a component, a system now that wasn't there at the time of initial construction. And then conversations come up about, well, how can I operate these systems in a cohesive fashion? Well, that's something that matters to you when you put your operations hat on. But the minute you put that operations hat on, you're going to discover not only is it a systems issue, a bunch of individual systems, but I'm going to need collaboration to make it all work together. So I do strongly feel that this is a good language to use to describe what system of systems means. But I think the distinguishing between, if you will, the capital driven first cost determined system that you buy versus the ongoing operation of the facility or facilities is a very good way to talk about it. And to this discussion of the value or the outcome is, how can I best run my building or buildings, my portfolio? How do I maximize my return, if you will, on my investment that I made in all these systems? How do I do that? Well, I think you got to live in the SOS column to realize that outcome of realize that those benefits, whether it be the value of the building, the ongoing cost to maintain and operate the building, to meet the expectations of your tenants. All of those things, in my mind, occur in the right column. From a planning and design and standpoint, because it's all operational oriented, in my way of thinking. So it's, that's
So
my
so
contribution.
once the building is built
Right,
and the tenant or the occupiers, it may be the same company, it doesn't really matter,
right.
moves in,
Mhm.
they are gonna bring some systems with them, telephone systems, whatever, right? Digital. That cannot be in the systems column,
Right,
right? That inherently is that, and the capability that those new systems bring are really emergent. They could not have been anticipated when they were specifying the building without knowing who the occupant's going to be or what
right.
the occupant system's going to be.
And they can't anticipate change. I mean, look what's happened as a result of COVID. How many office buildings are having to redefine the create a new intent for the building itself, knowing that they can't fill it the way they did prior to 2021?
And to add to
So-
that, Steve, is this, we're actually today, in many cases, you don't know, and an operator does not know how many folks are gonna be in the building at one time, given the remote working and everything else. So I may have a building that is set for 500 occupants, and it's Tuesday, unless you get the data, of course, that it's only 225 people. But then more importantly, where are they within the building? How does the system of systems address something like that? Or does it, I should say?
Or, I think the answer is it can, if
Right,
we give it the information.
right.
Right.
One
So
observation,
that
what it makes is there's a tremendous, maybe almost a column in between, where we have to move from a system to a system in transition to a system of systems. I think everybody who builds a system now understands that their goal is that their system becomes a system of systems. And so they begin on this journey to migrate from the left-hand column to the right-hand column. And how far they are along in that evolution may help them sell their products, because they not only have a system that supports their product, they have a connection to a system of systems, which is more powerful. So I don't know, I think that transition, I think, is something that, and I think that's what we're all talking about, is how do we start that transition to get people stop thinking about systems and thinking that you're no longer a system. You in fact are a system of systems. What are you doing about it?
The other
well,
question.
you are actually a system within a system of systems,
Right.
Right.
right? You're participating as a, sorry, Mark.
I was gonna say, the other question I have for the group, and maybe it's later on during the month or whatever, is who is the ultimate party responsible for a system of system? Is it
This is
an owner?
this is
Go ahead. In other words,
it's really this continuance row here.
Okay, but
It's inherently collaborative.
I
In other
agree.
words,
But
But where's
somebody's
the-
gotta
the
own
Mar-
it.
Yeah,
Somebody's gonna have
Mark's
to own
point
it.
is well taken, Anto. It's who owns it? And
Well-
the quick answer is it's the owner, but is it?
But I think you're thinking like a system thinking
I was
when you
just gonna
say that. If you say who owns it, it is now a system by saying that, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that your system, your piece of that, you're responsible for, and the edges of that system, if you will. And it's the key thing that sticks out from the moment you put this up to me, Anto, is the difference between integrated and interoperable. And in the responsibility of a system owner who wants their system to be part of a system of systems, the onus is on creating and assuring interoperability for that, right? That is the key factor. So I think it's to answer your question, Mark, to kind of address that is, a building owner could own its system of systems, so to speak. But if you think more broadly, everybody owns their piece of the pie, right? Their system and their edges and making it interoperable. And that's where right now nobody thinks about that when they design and build a system. They, think very much a sort of a container in and of itself with, that walled garden approach that we talk about. And I think part of what needs to happen is for people to, from the beginning, design their systems to be interoperable and therefore capable of being part of a system of systems. That's a piece that has never really existed before.
Right, and I think the interoperable is one of the key differentiators here. It's not just integration anymore or integrated, it's interoperable, and that's what systems of systems, that is an outcome as I see it. Is
Yeah.
my building can finally be interoperable. All the crap in my building is
you
now-
said that that's an outcome. Why is
Yes.
that an outcome? That's a desire.
Well, I look at that, desires also can be an outcome. Why can't it be? I want my building to be 100% interoperable. That's, to me, is an outcome. Can be an outcome. Depends on how you define it.
It's an outcome that you would ask for when you were building the building.
That is correct.
Correct.
That is correct. Oh,
Good.
it must be interoperable, not, oh, it'd be nice to have, but no, it must be. And if Anto's solutions and services aren't able to do that, or he's unable to deliver that, I'm sorry, I'll find the next one.
To
Because it's the-
support of
'cause
Mark's
Anto, it's-
point here, real quick,
Yeah.
as a system designer, an outcome that I want to achieve is to be interoperable, right?
Right.
That is a design goal. I mean, we have it on our system, right? Every time we get to a decision point about certain things, some of those come back to, does that make the system more or less interoperable? Right? So that decision criterion then over time pushes you to have a system that's more open, more interoperable. And that's the outcome that I'm shooting for, right? I want to be interoperable. I want to be able to consume data from others, and I want to be able to share data equally as well.
And I think that's important, Tracy, is that to me, kind of when you step back and look at it, you're just saying, what's this system of system doing? So yes, it's interoperable, but it's also a huge amount of data now that's available, and the experts for the individual fields can pull on all the information, to actually provide a better service to their customer. It just, it kind of gives you that information and data that allows you to make better decisions.
Yeah.
With in your area of expertise.
The challenge, just speaking from personal experience, I think sometimes the challenge with system designers is they don't know what they don't know, right? they don't know how their data, we don't know how this data is all going to come together and get used someday, right? We can only imagine some of the AI applications and what AI might be able to do once it has access to all this data in a a nice clean way. So when you're designing a system, it's hard to imagine, and there are so many reasons to not make decisions, to leave things or to make things more open. I know undoubtedly supported variables from various devices that are just in case variables. Well, we don't need that data right now, but just in case, let's include it in the schema and make sure that we're sharing that data, right? And I think, a lot of people approach system design sort of as, initially as an MVP. What's the minimally viable product that I need? And then we'll embellish over time. But some of this, I think, to get it right, you have to be making those little daily decisions all along the design path in order to end at a place where you are interoperable, right? It's not one magic button or one magic feature that you add at the end of your system design. It has to be done, moment by moment from the very beginning, I think.
So, Jim, you obviously spend most of your life thinking about BACnet, and BACnet, generally speaking, or a network similar to that, is in buildings, right? And generally, it's highly specified. How do you think that plays into this thing? Is a BACnet system a system, or is it done in a way that could be part of system of systems, or does anybody even ask that question right now?
No, I think they do, Anto, and I think that BACnet has been an early interoperable standard, which allows for system of system type interaction. The problem that I come up with is one that Mark frequently asks, which is technology aside, who's actually going to use this stuff, right? Where is the value going to reside? And when I look at it, I see more of business problems than technology problems. I think that there are things that we can do to the technology to help, but I'm most concerned about the organization of how buildings are built and how information is used, and how architects, design, and construction, which some people refer to as the left column, is very different than the operating side. One of the problems is on the operating side, I can see the value accruing to outsourced facility managers, the JLLs, the CBREs, etc., people of that ilk. Question is, does an average owner know, or are they designed organizationally to take advantage of any of this information, any of these value propositions? And I think that it's that primary demand stimulus where owners really don't know what to do. They don't know how to get organized. It's this organizational behavior thing we've talked a lot about before as to how to use this information. Whereas an outsourced facility manager can use it to make money in their business model.
To operate the building more efficiently.
Correct.
That's really the point. Right.
That's right.
So Jim, if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that, I think I hear two things. One is that the outsourced facility companies like a CBRE or JLL are since that's their business, operating buildings, they're in a stronger position relative to most building owners to actually look for and identify capabilities in these individual systems that would allow them to do their job better.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's the emergent.
Emergent. So
what I'm surprised by, Steve, is that we're not seeing these other very rich markets like healthcare, where there are very significant regulatory elements that go into how these buildings are run, or pharma and life sciences. These different verticals have every reason in the world to want to attack this SOS technology. and exploit it. But they haven't been
Mhm.
able to do it from what I can see. By the way,
So
the facility
my-
management companies don't really do it very much either, but they could benefit the most
Yeah.
by it.
So question for you on that is, would, could you make the argument that the way to, instead of going left to right as a thought process is what we've been doing historically, if we went right to left or top down, however you want to imagine it, right, is that the design process should start at operations and then lead to how you craft your individual systems. But if you design the building with these, if you will, principles, these characteristics, these that are in the SOS column, if that was how you first, if that was the beginning of the process, not an afterthought, right? That would be a fundamental, taking the industry and turning it on its head. And can you see, is there a way to make that, is there a way to make that happen? Is that the right way for us to, if you will, drive the industry?
I think it makes all the sense in the world, Steve. The only problem is that there's a tremendous amount of inertia by people on the construction side
Right.
that neither know or care about these value propositions. They
Right.
don't know about them. They haven't been incented to learn about them. So to me, that's I think your idea is brilliant, to look top down and, start at Mark's position, which are what are the outcomes,
Right.
and work back to the systems that you're going to build to support the system of system outcomes.
Right.
So that's like equivalent to if some of us are going to create an airline, we probably are going to start from the right side, right? And then we will make decisions as to which airports to go to and which airplanes to use, which are all the systems. But what we're interested in is the airline system,
Right.
which is the thing that's actually going to make money for us if we're going to have an airline. So it's equivalent to that. Right? We want to focus on the operation of the building, understanding the operation of the building is inherently going to be requiring multiple systems, the building itself being one of them. Is that the way you're thinking?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. Yep.
And I'm agreeing.
So Rick, you voice quite often the sort of thing that you see in the market from especially enterprise grade sort of building owners, that they just want the information so they can do whatever it is that they need to do. That seems like starting from the SOS side. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think that enterprise folks at the highest levels, and especially with all the IT talk these days about AI and everything, they just expect all things to be able to work together, because there's that, growing reality in our lives, in our, other worlds, other realms of the different systems are starting to work together, and data from one can work on the other. And that reality of being able to deliver that, if everybody will, play their position and work on the edges, as Tracy was saying, and make sure that the edges of your system are going to be expected to connect with the edges of other people's systems, then the owners can, more likely get what they want. And we were talking a couple of days ago about this sort of exciting project that we're working on right now, where the owner has very clearly said what the return is going to be, and it's going to be dramatic, and it's in that range of 30% of total cost of ownership if it can get all the systems to work together. Now, then we as contractors, or we as providers of systems, we're like, well, it's going to be almost impossible to get all the systems to work together, which is perhaps true, but there's no lack of clarity from the owner standpoint of what they think it would be worth if they could get the systems to work together. No lack of clarity at all. Very clearly laid out. And I feel like that's been the way for 15 or 20 years. And as an industry, we've been stuck in saying, well, we can use an API to do that. Just give me $1 million. And yeah, but it's getting easier what we're doing with the coalition, especially under the umbrella of what we're trying to do with the Linux Foundation. I think owners will be even more and more encouraged to be able to say, damn it, I really do want these things to work together. So please play your position a little bit freaking better.
So again, going back to my airline, that's the same as sort of suddenly discovering that Boeing 737s can't land in certain airports. That's a problem, right? That's not interoperable.
Right.
Right. You expect that airliners and airports are interoperable. You don't have to worry about, other than size and some limiting, there's really not much constraint.
So one area, and I'm just thinking here, is this. So we talked about interoperable, great. And I'm sure we all have our own definitions of what does interoperable actually mean. My question then is this: how do we see system of systems truly playing in the command and control aspect of a building? So if all my systems of systems, I have a system of systems, and I'm getting the data, I'm getting whatever that we've talked about. And from that data, it's telling me that I have to ensure that some kind of change is made, command and control, whether that is through AI or whether that is through manual on whatever. How do you guys see command and control fitting in this?
I think a simple example, Mark, might well be something you touched on earlier, how you deal with the fact that a building is half empty or full because of the change of working patterns to, dealt by COVID. Then, system of systems should be able to help you, because you should only be enabling, the services for the areas that you need, and you can actually send people to the first and third floors instead of the 22nd floor, and save and optimize your building by not running the lifts that high, the lighting, the air conditioning, the medium room lettings, just everything could then be. It's a very simple example, but it's that sort of concept of where you are then using that interoperable bit to actually optimize the efficiency of your building, and also providing the services where they're needed.
One thing I would say, Mark, and maybe you're thinking about part of this, it seems to me like it would be pretty easy and likely predictable that some of these system of systems could end up a little bit open looped, meaning too many cooks in the kitchen. Too many different things having the ability to control or make changes to various aspects of the system, which could affect other parts of the system, and so on and so on and so on, right? So I do see a need for some definition about, who has the rights to make certain changes and do certain things within some of these more complicated systems.
So
Too many people trying to change the set point all at once, for instance.
So what you're saying is there has to be sort of some management of the system, of how you interact with the system of systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is probably a system. It's probably a system to do that.
Guardrails at least, right? And
Isn't there a word for that? Authorization? Which is
authorization
to BACnet Secure Connect and many other modern cybersecurity standards.
Well, I'm even thinking simple applications. When you're interacting blind control with lighting control and occupancy, there are way more benefits than than bad things, I think. So don't take this the wrong way. But the more open we get, I think the more open we are to having some conflicts happening.
Look,
I
again,
think back to my days of digital design and having to watch for race conditions and stuff on timing and clocking and stuff like that. So same kind of basic design principles I think apply.
Rick,
to
you're
Mark's
saying?
point though about who's going to own it or who's going to sell it, who's going to support it, who's going to warranty it, as the system of systems. I think that those questions are being, again, solved by other domains, which is that's a 57-page paper that Ken was talking to earlier, is like in other domains, the same sort of problems and questions are being answered in terms of system of systems. And again, we're going to be able to look to some of these other domains as to how are they solving it there. And a lot of it is, following the IT models for responsibilities, permissions, policies, all of that. And the other thing that was interesting is that article, that 57-page article that is all about how are other industries handling this system of systems challenge, is that it talks about software defined industries. And we're talking about system of systems, but for simplicity's sake, I like to think of it as like it is software. We're talking about software systems. We're talking about software that sits on top of physical things, but it's, if you think about it in terms of software enabled buildings, maybe that makes it easier to get people's heads around, okay, well, how and where are we going to handle the policies? How and where are we going to handle security? How and where are we going to do these different functions? And think less about it as data and more about software maybe helps. And again, I'm borrowing language from the Linux Foundation, which is turning out to be really fun, to be able to help solve some of the problems.
Rick, I think your point
Dave?
about that they'll help us educate, I think that's, once you adopt the system of systems thinking, there's plenty of examples out there, and in the report also they're talking about the advantages of that, and actually that your future success is dependent on your supporting of system of systems. So yes, I think the education, let's just look at what the rest of the world is doing. They've got thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of man hours of software thinking in there, and we just need to follow a lot of the things they've done. So yes, that's a big piece. Is the systems of systems will educate us. All we need to do is to learn how they've done whatever it is they've done. So thanks for bringing that point up.
Wondering, David, if you have a perspective on this. I know that you're in your car. David, you want to chime in? Obviously not. So other thought.
I was gonna ask you guys, so system of systems, and obviously, I think we all would agree, tell me if you don't, is new conversation that we are having in our industry. All right. So I'm just wondering if we could poll 500 owners and operators, do you know what system of systems is? Just yes or no. What do you think the percentage for yes would be?
Very low.
Very low.
Yeah, yeah.
Less than 30%.
I'd say less than
But what
5%.
person, where in the organization you're asking the question?
Well, you do it throughout the whole thing. In other words, in the C-suite and in the FM management side of the house. So,
In the
And those
FM
people-
management side, it would be 0.
yeah, but again, who has the responsibility to manage and operate that facilities, those buildings, of which I'm saying C-suite does play a role in that. So anyway,
You know, I'm thinking about that, and it depends on the context, I think, a little bit too, right? In how you or when you ask this, and what meeting you're in when you ask this. But the other thing that occurs to me, the basic concept of system of systems is explained in, 30 seconds. And if you asked your question and said, when systems are communicating with one another to essentially form a larger organic system of systems, most intelligent owners would understand that concept, I think. Do you guys agree with that?
Right.
Mhm.
Yes, especially if they're
Mhm.
aware of how IT systems work,
Right.
like accounting and CRM and all that kind of stuff. They would understand that those are systems. Somehow they work with each other. They may not know how they do that, but they may not know that that's called system of systems, but they understand that the dynamics of those systems that can work with each other.
So,
Yeah.
David,
I think cold, the percentage is pretty low.
Right.
To Mark's question, but with very little warming, the percentage goes up high.
yeah. So if you ask the question, do you, Mr. Owner, do you have easy access to to all the data you might want to have from all your operational technology systems?
great question.
Can you easily get access? Let me phrase it that. Can you easily get access to the data from all of your operational technology systems? I
That's
think
the point that Rick was saying, right?
right. And I think the answer would come back largely, no, we can't. Okay. So then that, in a way, is the flip side of asking the question about, do you know what a system is? But it basically sets the table for explaining where this all needs to go and what problem we're trying to solve. And by pointing out that the reason you can't get easy access to it is because it was never designed to be interoperable to begin with.
Nothing like the power of a good leading question, right?
But it predisposes that the owner cares or asks about information. If you look inside of how an owner manages an organization, and if you look at silos like risk or environmental health and safety, energy, operations, how do they report up internally? Does the owner speak to the COO, the CFO? Where does this information actually flow in those large organizations? And I think that one of the fundamental problems is that the owner never at the C level never thinks about the systems that provide this information, because that's not how they interact with and talk with the information.
Yeah.
They interact with different parts of their organizational silo, like the chief legal counsel, risk management. All these different silos roll up differently. And the first thing that comes to mind is, hey, how can I get all those things working together? Maybe that's what a CEO should be doing, but they're probably worrying about the zero and first order problems that they have in their business. And once again, this is lower down the chain. So the key for us is how to articulate our technical story to empower those different elements of the building to create this value. To me, that's where we're missing the mark, not can we get the technology to work.
This is an education problem, not a technology problem, is what you're saying.
I think we can all agree to that statement, Tracy. At least I can.
But David, I just want to bring him in as we wrap up. Do you want to just wrap this up? Hopefully nicely.
I don't think you'll like what I have to say as the conclusion here. But so 20 years ago, I was in the corporate services business unit of Morgan Stanley. And when I was there, my best friend was the global head of acquisitions, but basically all the financial spending. And there was legal, there was security, there was property management, there was the in-house legal team, multimedia engineering and all of that stuff, marketing. And, the CEO at the time, if you asked him what he wanted to know about his building systems, he goes, that's not my concern in any way, shape, or form. That's why we have corporate services. And the corporate services department, the managing director, if you asked, they probably would just want to know space utilization and which spaces they can get rid of as quickly as possible to stay as profitable as possible. And then we're also, the scenarios it seems like we've been talking about for the last half an hour, 45 minutes, is where the CEO or the owner of the asset actually uses the asset and is occupying the asset, when in fact a ton of commercial property, regardless of whether it's office, retail, multifamily, or industrial, a large percentage of the asset owners are simply looking at it as a financial investment, and they don't care about how the building operates at all. They just care about their return on capital. So with these perspectives in mind, it becomes very challenging to offer a value story that resonates. And I like the slide that we have up on screen, and it's very idealistic, and I agree in the ideals of it. However, the governance model from a security, cybersecurity, and corporate security standpoint would be of the utmost concern to any CFO or CTO or CIO who saw this. And they'd be like, who's making the rules for how this stays secure, and how does that work? So I think the system of systems is absolutely the ideal we should continue to strive towards. But I think we have a challenge, especially in this country, because the incentives for paying attention to these things are very low, because the cost of energy is low and there's no real carbon disclosure or reporting that's required. What's very different in Europe and other markets is they do have to pay attention to this stuff, and it is impacting the value of the assets themselves. And so the conclusion that I would share with everyone is, we need to keep going. We need to keep pounding at this. We need to keep working towards this. But the value story needs to resonate with the owners who own the building, but actually have nothing to do with the operations or management or use of the buildings, and then the owner-occupant value stories. And we need a value story that resonates with both of those owners. And I think the cost of ownership and things like that are the right path to appeal to both of those groups. Most of the time, if it's an asset investment, it's some asset manager sitting in a cubicle in a building in New York City who talks to the property manager maybe once a quarter. So what's the value story to sell?
That's really a system. There is no value of the system of systems. If you just own the building and you don't care about how it's operated, that's just a system. There is no system of systems aspect to that. That's what you're saying. But I think maybe that's a good, good place for us. Yeah, that's a good place for us to pick it up next week.
Yeah,
we're gonna wrap. So past the top of the hour.
Sorry if I went long.
No,
that's okay. Okay, guys, thank you. It's good opening
everyone.
for this month, and we'll continue next week. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Bye.